Big news. Your soulmate is cursing themselves for choosing you after discovering the shocking truth about you, that you are. My beloved, stop for a moment. Before you scroll away, before you decide that this message is not meant for you, before you convince yourself that these words could never possibly describe your situation, I want you to listen carefully. Because something has changed. Someone has discovered something about you. Not something small. Not something ordinary. Not the kind of detail a person notices casually and then forgets by the next morning. This is the kind of truth that makes someone sit alone in silence and question every decision they have made. Your soulmate has discovered something about you that they never expected to discover. And now they are looking at the past differently. They are remembering conversations differently. They are replaying moments they once dismissed. They are remembering your silence. Your patience. Your strange disappearances. The moments when you seemed distant even though you were standing right in front of them. The times you smiled when you were actually hurting. The occasions when you could have exposed someone but chose not to. The opportunities you had to become bitter but somehow remained compassionate. And there is one realization haunting them more than anything else. They did not understand who they had chosen. They thought they knew you. They thought they had figured you out. They thought your personality was simple enough to understand. They believed they knew what you wanted, what you feared, what you would tolerate, what would make you leave, and what would make you stay. They were wrong. Completely wrong. The person they thought they were choosing was only the surface. And now they have discovered what existed underneath it. That discovery has shaken them. They may even be angry. Not necessarily angry with you. Angry with themselves. They are asking themselves questions they cannot answer. How did I miss this? Why didn't I see it sooner? How could someone like this have been standing in front of me all this time? Why did I treat them like they were ordinary? Why did I assume they would always be there? And perhaps the most painful question of all. Did I almost lose the one person I was supposed to recognize? Your soulmate is beginning to understand that there was always more to you than what you showed. You were never as easy to read as they believed. You were never as dependent on them as they imagined. You were never as desperate for their attention as they assumed. And you were certainly never as weak as some people wanted you to be. You simply knew how to remain quiet. There is a difference between weakness and restraint. There is a difference between having nothing to say and choosing not to speak. There is a difference between not knowing someone's truth and knowing it completely while deciding not to expose them. Your soulmate is discovering that difference now. And it is disturbing their entire understanding of you. They are beginning to realize that your silence was not emptiness. Your silence was observation. You were watching. You were learning. You were noticing patterns. You were seeing who stayed when they had nothing to gain. You were noticing who only appeared when they needed something. You were watching who celebrated your victories and who became uncomfortable whenever you succeeded. You noticed who asked about your dreams and who secretly hoped you would abandon them. You noticed everything. You simply didn't announce everything you noticed. That is the part your soulmate never understood. They thought your quietness meant you didn't know. Now they realize it meant you knew more than you were saying. And this realization has created a storm inside them. Because they are remembering moments when they lied to you. Moments when they hid things. Moments when they assumed you were unaware. Moments when they thought they could manipulate the situation because you seemed too emotionally attached to walk away. But now they are wondering whether you understood them even then. Perhaps you did. Perhaps you saw the hesitation in their voice. Perhaps you noticed the change in their behavior. Perhaps you recognized the inconsistency between their words and their actions. Perhaps you knew exactly what was happening. And still, you stayed quiet. Why? Because you wanted them to reveal themselves without being forced. You wanted the truth to come from their own behavior. You wanted to know whether they would eventually choose honesty voluntarily. And that is why your soulmate is struggling now. They are realizing that you gave them opportunities. More opportunities than they deserved. You gave them room to explain. You gave them chances to correct themselves. You gave them time. You gave them patience. You gave them forgiveness. But you never gave them unlimited access to your dignity. There was always a boundary. They simply didn't see it. Now they see it. And that boundary scares them. Because they understand that there is a version of you that can love someone deeply without chasing them. There is a version of you that can miss someone without contacting them. There is a version of you that can forgive someone without allowing them to repeat the same betrayal. There is a version of you that can cry for someone one night and wake up the next morning determined to protect your peace. Your soulmate did not know that version existed. Until now. And the shocking truth they have discovered may be this. You were never waiting for them to validate your worth. You were waiting to see whether they were capable of recognizing it. That changes everything. Because suddenly, the power dynamic they believed existed between you begins to disappear. They thought they were the one deciding whether this relationship would survive. They thought you needed their decision. They thought you were waiting for their approval. But now they are discovering something completely different. You have your own decision. And perhaps you have already made it. Perhaps you have already decided that love without respect is not enough. Perhaps you have already decided that chemistry without honesty is dangerous. Perhaps you have already decided that apologies without changed behavior are simply rehearsed excuses. Perhaps you have finally understood that loving someone does not require abandoning yourself. And your soulmate can feel that shift. Even if you haven't told them. Even if you haven't sent a message. Even if you haven't posted anything. Even if you haven't confronted them. They can feel that something is different. Your energy has changed. Your presence has changed. Your reactions have changed. You no longer respond to certain things the way you once did. You no longer explain yourself endlessly. You no longer fight to be understood by people committed to misunderstanding you. You no longer beg someone to see what they repeatedly refuse to see. And that silence is louder than any argument you could have made. Your soulmate is beginning to realize that they may have mistaken your patience for permanence. They assumed you would always remain available. They assumed there would always be another chance. They assumed that no matter what happened, you would eventually return. But something inside you has matured. Something inside you has become firm. You still care. That may be the most complicated part. You may still love them. You may still remember them. You may still wonder what could have happened if both of you had been honest from the beginning. But love no longer controls your decisions. And that is terrifying to someone who became comfortable believing they had emotional access to you. Now they are sitting with their own choices. And they are discovering that choices have consequences. They remember the moment they ignored your message. They remember the day they made you feel unimportant. They remember the conversation where you tried to explain your feelings and they dismissed them. They remember the time they chose pride over vulnerability. They remember every time they assumed you would never leave. And now those memories are returning with a completely different meaning. The past has not changed. Their understanding of the past has changed. That is the difference. A memory can remain identical while its meaning transforms completely. The sentence you once said casually may now haunt them. The look you gave them may now feel like a warning they failed to understand. The goodbye they thought was temporary may now feel permanent. And the person they once believed would chase them may now be the person they are desperately hoping will turn around. This is why your soulmate may be emotionally conflicted. Part of them wants to approach you. Another part is afraid. Part of them wants to confess everything. Another part fears what you will say. Part of them wants forgiveness. Another part knows forgiveness cannot erase consequences. They are standing between regret and courage. And eventually, one of those two will win. But before that happens, something else is being revealed. Your soulmate has discovered that you are not who they thought you were. You are stronger. More perceptive. More emotionally intelligent. More independent. More resilient. And perhaps more difficult to replace than they ever imagined. That last realization hurts. Because people sometimes understand someone's value only after experiencing their absence. When you were present, your kindness felt normal. Your messages felt normal. Your attention felt normal. Your support felt normal. Your presence became part of the background of their life. They didn't realize how much space you occupied. Then you became quiet. And suddenly, the room felt empty. Your absence began speaking. Your silence began answering questions. Your distance began revealing what your presence had been hiding. They started noticing little things. Songs reminded them of you. Places reminded them of you. Certain hours of the day became strangely heavy. They began opening old conversations. Reading old messages. Looking at old pictures. Remembering jokes. Remembering arguments. Remembering the way you used to say their name. And somewhere between nostalgia and regret, they encountered the truth. They had not simply chosen you. They had been given an opportunity to know someone rare. And they almost destroyed it through carelessness. That is what they are cursing themselves for. Not necessarily because they chose you, but because they chose you without understanding what they had. They entered your life thinking they were evaluating you. Now they realize you were evaluating whether they deserve to remain in yours. That reversal has shocked them. They are realizing that the relationship was never simply about whether you loved them. It was about whether they could handle the depth of the person who loved them. Because loving someone like you requires responsibility. It requires honesty. It requires emotional maturity. It requires consistency. It requires the courage to communicate instead of disappear. It requires the ability to admit mistakes without becoming defensive. It requires choosing the relationship even when pride says walk away. And perhaps they weren't prepared for that. Perhaps they wanted the beautiful parts of you without understanding the responsibility that came with being trusted by you. They wanted your warmth. But they weren't prepared for your boundaries. They wanted your loyalty. But they didn't understand that loyalty cannot survive unlimited betrayal. They wanted your attention. But they didn't realize your attention was a gift. They wanted your heart. But they didn't understand that your heart came with a history. A history of being disappointed. A history of rebuilding. A history of learning. A history that taught you not to give your entire soul to someone simply because they asked for it. That is the shocking truth. You have survived things they never saw. You have healed from battles they never knew existed. You have carried pain without turning it into cruelty. You have experienced disappointment without allowing it to destroy your capacity for love. And your soulmate is beginning to understand that your softness was never evidence that life had been easy for you. It was evidence that hardship did not succeed in changing your character. That is powerful. And it is precisely why they are reconsidering everything. They thought you were ordinary because you didn't advertise your strength. You didn't walk around announcing everything you had survived. You didn't need applause for every obstacle you overcame. You simply kept moving. Quietly. One day at a time. And now someone who underestimated you is finally recognizing the architecture of your strength. They can see the cracks you repaired. They can see the walls you rebuilt. They can see the emotional distance you created after being hurt. They can see why certain things trigger your silence. They can see why you don't trust promises easily. And they may finally understand why you valued actions more than words. You weren't demanding perfection. You were asking for sincerity. That is different. You could have forgiven mistakes. You could have accepted imperfections. You could have survived misunderstandings. What you couldn't survive forever was intentional disrespect. And now your soulmate understands that distinction. They are beginning to recognize the difference between losing your love and losing access to your love. Those are not always the same thing. You can love someone and still choose distance. You can forgive someone and still refuse to return. You can wish someone happiness and still understand that they are not healthy for your future. That kind of emotional maturity is difficult. But perhaps it is the maturity your soulmate is now being forced to develop. Because your absence has become their teacher. And regret has become their classroom. They are learning lessons they should have learned through conversation. They are learning patience because you stopped responding immediately. They are learning humility because their confidence about your feelings was misplaced. They are learning appreciation because your presence is no longer guaranteed. And they are learning that love cannot be maintained through assumptions. Love needs participation. Every day. Not just when someone is afraid of losing you. Not just when loneliness becomes unbearable. Not just when another person threatens your connection. Real love shows up before the emergency. Real love communicates before the silence becomes permanent. Real love protects what it claims to value. And your soulmate is beginning to understand that. They may not admit it yet. They may even pretend to be unaffected. They may act confident. They may tell others they have moved on. They may post as though everything is fine. But appearances are not always evidence of peace. Sometimes the loudest person is fighting the quietest battle. Sometimes someone smiles because they don't want anyone to know how much they regret. Sometimes pride creates a mask that only disappears when the person is alone. And when your soulmate is alone, they may finally face the truth. They miss you. Not merely your messages. Not merely your attention. They miss the feeling of being understood. They miss the safety of telling you something without explaining every detail. They miss the way you could detect their mood before they said anything. They miss your strange little habits. Your humor. Your stubbornness. Your intensity. Your ability to make ordinary conversations feel meaningful. They miss the person they took for granted. And that realization hurts because they know one thing now. Missing you does not automatically bring you back. Regret does not erase history. And realizing your value late does not guarantee another opportunity. That is the part they are struggling to accept. They may want the old version of you. But that version is gone. Not because you became cold. Because you became wiser. You learned. You grew. You changed. You discovered that your peace has value. You discovered that your time has value. You discovered that your emotional energy has value. And you stopped giving those things away to people who treated them as unlimited resources. Your soulmate is now looking at this new version of you and realizing, I don't know if I still have a place there. That question may be keeping them awake. And if they eventually return, they may not come back with the same confidence. They may come back differently. More carefully. More honestly. Less certain. More vulnerable. Because now they know that you are capable of walking away. And once someone understands that your presence is a choice rather than a guarantee, they begin treating that presence differently. But there is another layer to this story. The shocking truth may not only be that you are stronger than they thought. It may be that you have been protecting them from a truth about themselves. You saw their potential before they saw it. You believed in the version of them they had not yet become. You saw their fear beneath their arrogance. You saw their insecurity beneath their distance. You saw their tenderness beneath their defensiveness. And you loved the possibility. But there comes a moment when loving someone's potential becomes exhausting if they refuse to become responsible for their present. Perhaps your soulmate is finally confronting that. They are asking themselves whether they pushed away the person who believed in them most. They are remembering how you encouraged them, how you listened, how you tried to understand, how you celebrated their small victories. And they realize that you weren't merely loving them. You were seeing them. There is a difference. Many people can desire someone. Few people truly see them. And perhaps that is what your soulmate misses most. Being seen. But now the tables have turned. They are seeing you. And what they see is frighteningly beautiful. They see someone who can survive without them. Someone who can love without begging. Someone who can remember without returning. Someone who can forgive without forgetting. Someone who can walk away while still caring. And that kind of person cannot be controlled by guilt, fear, jealousy, or emotional manipulation.